Hello and welcome to Bringing Education Home. I'm Herb.
And I'm Christina. And together we bring you experts and ideas to help grow healthy, happy, successful families that are both inside.
And outside the box. If you like the show, be sure to follow Christina on Facebook.
And please leave us a like review on your favorite podcast platform.
Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Bruce Graham. Bruce Graham is a relationship coach for both singles and couples to help people become relationship heroes. And he also works with youth to help them create comic books, visual comic books, and comic book art. So welcome, Bruce. I know it wasn't a big bio, so tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and how you came about doing it, how you started, how you found out about this and started working with all of these things.
Youth and couples.
Okay, thank you, Herb. Thank you, Christina. Thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast. How I came about doing this, I got an MSW back in 1986, so a long time ago. I had been an overnight camp, summer camp counselor. I like that adolescent age, where they're beginning to be a little bit challenging. I like that energy. My first job was in a place called Mercy Boys Home. So again, it was tough kids. So these were not adjudicated criminals, but some of them had adjudications in the past. But they had to be at Mercy because they chose to. It wasn't state funded, it was privately funded. And they were always given a choice to be here or to go to juvenile justice or something, but they chose it. So I got to do guided imagery. I learned hypnosis years ago, so I got to help with that violence reduction, to give them an alternative, and it worked very well. We did a lot of one-on-one. I had some kids, well, as one in particular who was on suicide watch, would not talk to me in the confines of the four walls of the office. But we would go out for a walk and a talk, and then he would relax, he would open up, and he would reveal a lot of what was going on inside of him. My dad was a private detective, and when I had worked for him in undergrad, so when I was going back to grad school, I had left him because I felt like I had gained a boss, lost a father. But when I was going to grad school, he had become the in-house attorney for a law firm. He had given his business somebody, but it was a personal service business, and if you don't take care of it, you lose clients. So the fellow who had taken over really had lost all the business. I asked my dad, "Do you mind if I resurrect Raymond Associates?" He said, "I'm glad it was your idea, not mine." So yeah, I went into that. So when I was working at the boys' home, I also was running a private detective agency, and I was dating a woman. I wanted to have a child, and as the marriage was closing in, I had to decide where was I going to make a living to support a family. And frankly, I was looking at developing a private practice. I wasn't coming into like a lot of referral people that could help me build the business. And my detective agency, the minute I called the attorneys, my dad had good business. Whoever I called, they said, "Is Bob Graham?" I said, "No, not Bob Graham, but I'm Bruce. I've worked on many of your cases, but didn't come into you under my name." I said, "Okay, kid." And I was a kid back then. We'll give you a shot. And so the business grew very fast. And I had to say, okay, where am I going to make the money fastest? So it was going to be the private detective agency. So I quit doing counseling, but my heart was always in doing something for young people. In 1993, the Chicago Tribune ran a daily series for which they won a Pulitzer Prize Award. It was called Killing Our Children. And every day, somebody in the city of Chicago under the age of 15 met a violent death. And I'm reading these little vignettes. I'm like, this is crazy. Where do we live? I grew up in a nice, quiet suburb. It was very close to Chicago, but I could walk the streets at any time of the day or night that I wanted to, and I didn't ever worry about my safety. And after reading this, I was doing a program. It was a transformational program, and my seminar leader said, "You can have anything you want as long as you're willing to take a stand and act with commitment." And I asked her, I said, "What about something as big as community safety?" She goes, "Well, I invite you to take this week and see what you could do." And it was our guest week. So I called young Mayor Daley, never got through to him. I called Mike Ditka, never got through to him. I called all these youth organizations. Them I got in touch with, and the first thing, well, who are you and why do you want to know? My question is always, what are you doing to keep kids from killing each other? And they eventually would invite me out to see their programs. And what I learned was every one of them said, you know, the newspapers want to see what's violent, and later I would hear what bleeds leads. If it bleeds, it leads. They said, nobody wants to see our programs. So I went and visited a number of youth organizations. Some of them were around the corner from each other. I remember on the west side of Chicago, one program had swimming and one had acting. But there were two different churches, not the same denomination. They didn't know each other. And they'd been, the priest and the minister, they've been there for years. So I introduced them to each other. So what we did was, I started a youth organization, but it was to network youth organizations together. Yeah. It was called NOAA, Network for Organizations in Action. And I had a board of directors, and we were not effective fundraisers, but all we were doing was creating this database. And then in Illinois, there was the Illinois Council for the Prevention of Violence. They were getting state funding. So since they had state funding, I called up the director and I said, would you like our database? And she said, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So my board of directors said, well, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to create comic books, kids. They're like, what are you talking about? One of the investigations I had done was for a guy, his name's Gary Calabono. And Gary and his wife, Patty, had taken in a foster child, and he had been beaten by his birth father. And the birth father fractured his skull, broke his arm before he was 6 months old. So the birth father went to prison. The birth mother, the child was taken away. He was in foster care. Yeah. And, when I was in my graduate program, I met a woman, and her roommate was adopting hard to place foster children. And one of them was Jimmy. So, she called me up and said, my roommate, Mary Pat, needs a private detective. And what was happening was that the birth mother, during the adoption process, it was almost finalized, but all of a sudden the birth mother shows up with a new man in her life who's going to take care of her and little Jimmy. Well, in the world of battered women, the maxim is battered women go from batterer to batterer. Mm-hmm. So the fear was that this guy's going to be a batterer too, and Jimmy's not going to be safe. So they hired me to do some backgrounding on this guy. And back then we didn't have the openness of the records that we have today. Yeah. So I had a source, and he got me the information. This young man had never beaten a woman he was dating, but he had put his parents in the hospital a couple of times. Mm-hmm. So it was clear it was not a safe environment for little Jimmy, but we had to massage how to work with the attorney representing Mary Pat, and Gary Calabono was funding the investigation. So when and Gary owned a chain of comic book stores. It was the first retail chain of comic book stores called Moondog. So I called him up. I said, Gary, I want to do something where I get kids' voices speaking about those issues that are happening in their neighborhoods. Yeah. We have all these adults saying what you should do, but nobody's asking the kids. And I said, I want to get it out in graphic form because kids like photos, pictures. I like pictures, and I found out there's a huge community that really are comic book aficionados. I was not one of them, but, the minute I spoke what we were doing, I got one of our teachers, his daughter was being recruited by the Gangster Disciples, and he was a teacher at the school, the Chicago School for the Art Institute. Yeah. He says, I'll do anything. So he became one of our teachers. And Gary Calabono, I said, Gary, can you get me any comic book artists? He says, absolutely. Because I knew that he liked kids, had been a foster parent. So he got me a great guy who got me a couple other people. So that's how we began to do. Now, I don't draw. Sometimes I had to show the kids what I was envisioning, and I would do stick figures and said, Bruce, we don't even understand your stick figures.
That's me. Can't understand the stick figures.
But there's a wonderful book, and I learned about publishers' copies. It was by an author, Scott McCloud, and it's called Understanding Comics. And everything he did, in fact, I have a copy here. everything he did to show you how to create comic books, he's done in graphic form.
Oh, nice.
So when he would talk about the gutters between the cells, he would show you in comic book form. So I devoured this book, and I was told that you could write to the publisher, tell them what you're doing, and ask for publisher copies. I think that's the term. And I got the kids books so that they could take the book home and learn how to create comic books. So we all learned together.
Uh-huh.
And initially there was some difficulty because I was looking for hardcore gang affected kids, and we had a McDonald's, well, the Rock and Roll McDonald's downtown Chicago, and very popular. It's in the inner city, and I would go and I would talk to the kids there. I said, "Are you in a gang?" I'm like, "No." "Are you in a gang? Are you in a gang? Are you in a gang?" And finally, one Asian kid came back to me, and he says, "You're the guy who wants no fun." And I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "I'm a prince in a Filipino gang. And I like what you're up to, but none of my people are going to participate because we're all about making money,
Yeah.
but I will talk with you." So I got my little introduction to some of the gang activity. What happened was I was at a school called Our Lady of the Angels, and the woman who was the teacher said, "You should meet this girl, Charlie. Charlie does handmade comic books." And I interviewed some of the kids because I wanted to find out what the kids were experiencing.
Right.
So I was doing a lot of focus groups. And when I heard from this teacher about Charlie, you know, I was like, okay. But I found out I had to go through a guy, Reverend Jim Wolf, who was the minister of the Lawndale Christian Reformed Church, because Charlie is slow. Charlie didn't graduate high school. Charlie barely got through junior high school, but Charlie was a PhD in art.
Yeah.
All these drawings back there, that's Charlie's finished product. So at one
Right.
point, I got permission to talk with her, and her drawings were so wonderful. I took them to the School of the Art Institute. And there was a woman who was in charge of community outreach. Her name was Jenny Kiesling. And she looked at the drawing. She says, "Has this person had any art training?" So Charlie was working in my office, my detective agency, and I called her. I said, "Charlie, this woman here at the Art Institute wants to know, do you have any art training?" She said, "Well, I think she was very stuttering, so she, I think in second grade and third grade, I had some training." So Jenny is on speakerphone. She says, "Charlie, no, I mean like college level." She says, "Well, no, I never had that." She goes, "Do you ever think about the School of the Art Institute?" And she said, "Well, I thought about it." She goes, "Well, I came there one time." And she said, "What happened?" She said, "Well, the woman at the reception desk asked me if I had an appointment." And so Jenny said, "What'd you do?" She said, "Well, I left." So "Why'd you leave?" She goes, "Because I know that you're prejudiced against poor Black people."
Oh.
So Jenny says, "Charlie, I'm giving Bruce some papers. And when he gets back to his office, you two are going to fill out these papers together. And I'm giving you a scholarship to the School of the Art Institute."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, things started to make a difference. We had one of the kids who started participating with us. He got the Darrell Stingley Award for the most improved student in his school. We had other people, the most improved math student. What I learned was, one time I was listening to NPR, I was driving National Public Radio, and they were doing an interview with a school in Pittsburgh, and they were known for their jazz, musicianship, and pottery. And what they said was, we're in the heart of the deprived areas, but we don't have metal detectors. We can't keep our kids away from school. Our kids want to come to school, because they would have professional jazz musicians come and cut records. It goes back to the old days, cut tapes or something, but train with them. And then those students would be on the tape with the professional musicians. So they said, I liken it to pull education versus push education. If you find what a kid is interested in, you can't stop them from learning.
Yeah.
That's one of the core principles of what we're doing at our school. And I'd like to take you back to some of the very first things that you said. You were working with this child in a home that they chose to go to, but their choice was juvie hall or this other program. So it's a choice, but it's not necessarily a choice, but they chose that home. And you worked with this one child that wouldn't talk to you inside of a building, but once you got out and started walking, that he would open up and talk. And one of the things that children these days need is life and an understanding that there is stuff out there. So many of these kids now, what's happening, especially in cities and inner cities, is they're stuck in buildings all day. They see the stuff there, the propaganda, the news, all of that stuff, and they don't really have a sense of what life really is. They don't understand the trees, the grass, the life, the stuff beyond what is living, what it means to them to be living. So when you start introducing them to things like you said, meditation, like visualization, they start to learn
Drawing
some of the what it means to be human. So instead of being taught how to stay alive, they start getting taught how to be human and what being human means. And that goes back into also what you're doing with your art. It's like, it's not about living. It's not about making a paycheck or keeping alive or being in a gang. It's what makes you alive as a human being, what fires your soul. And so by doing your comic book, not only are you teaching them and giving them something, art, which is one of these unfathomable things that makes no sense, that creates this sense of awe, and it puts people in touch with the godliness and the spirituality within them, whether they really understand that or not. So way back at the start, you started talking about that, and I wanted to bring that back in because you had it right, and then you went into more of your business stuff, your detective stuff yourself. But that thought, I think, was a seed that kept growing, it sounds like. And then when you brought that back forward, I just wanted to say I heard that way out front, and now you're bringing this out and you're expanding it in a much more broad way to help more people. And so you're bringing these children a sense of life and humanity and humanness, where it goes into the soul instead of just into the brain and the life and the being alive, I guess would be to say it. So that's kind of what I got from where you were at. And I just wanted to like throw that in there, say, hey, I'm seeing you, I'm understanding this. I got the thread through all of that, and I just wanted to help other people kind of really understand that. So
It's a beautiful
go.
summation. Beautiful. Yeah, it reminds me, another kid who was on my caseload. He'd been a gang leader, and in one of our sessions, he says, yeah, I've shot people. He says, but I still am a good kid. His name was George, Jorge. I said, okay, so tell me what qualifies you. He says, I never killed anybody. I said, good, then we have something to work with, because it was important to him that you understand he's still a good kid. He's still salvageable.
Yeah.
So we started to work with that. Everybody has something that leaves. I volunteered another program called Gang for You and Me, where people had to read, these were kids who got convicted, but not major offenses. And they had to read a book called Love is Letting Go of Fear. And it's how your life is shaped by the choices you make. And it was so much, someday, one day, I'm going to make my mama proud of me. Someday, one day, I'm going to make the shorties proud of me. Someday, one day, I'm going to go back and get my GED. Someday, one day, always holding out that glimmer of hope for someday, one day, I'm going to be a whole lot better than I am. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, and I was just loving this whole way we're weaving this through, because it's the message we want our parents to understand, that as you're working with children, don't just focus on the academics. Make sure you're focusing on that whole child. Do the art, do the music, do the things that they love, that they can get in tune with, to bring that hope forward, to bring that beauty inside of them forward, so that we can, like you said, pull the education. Because once they get that light, that hope, then they're going to want to learn a whole bunch of stuff, because they know they can do it.
Yes, I really agree, Christina. My board of directors at some point, sometimes they would say, well, this is great because the kids are really doing everything. I said, you know what? It's an intergenerational partnership. It's kind of like parenting.
Yeah.
Your kids have brilliance, your kids have wonder, they have a sense of adventure, but they need guidance. And our kids were the same way. we guided them, we introduced them to the whole world of comic book creating. You know, many of them have been taggers where they would draw graffiti, but that was the only medium that they had to work with. Once we gave them a different medium, that was just amazing. One time I had to take the kids home. We used to have a booth that donated to us, the Chicago Comic-Con, through this Gary Campolono. I later learned Gary was the chairman of the Comic-Con, but I didn't know that at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm driving the kids. I had my son with me, and he's in a suburb. And so I'm driving. I'm a divorced dad at that point. So I'm driving, and we're driving down the street and say, hey, man, they got hoops. They got hoops. Not only that, they got nets, you know? And when I drove up to, my son, it was my old house, the garage door was open. And man, does your ex-wife know that the garage door is open? I'm like, yeah, but in their environment, that was a no-no.
Exactly.
One time they came to work on a comic book, and the comic book teacher, we had a room where they had their, operation, and then I had my office down the hall. She comes to me, she goes, they won't work on the comic book. And these were good kids. So I come down the call. I said, what's going on? They said, well, we used to play basketball in the alley. We had a hoop that we put up there, and somebody got shot and killed in the alley. And now our parents won't let us play basketball in the alley.
Oh.
They said, we want to go to the park and play basketball because we had a nice park nearby.
Yeah.
I said, okay, we used to meet for 90 minutes. I said, let's make a deal. The first 45 minutes, we work on the comic book. The last 45 minutes, basketball. I said, okay. So that was, listening to what motivated them.
Yeah.
They were missing their basketball. And, those of us who grew up in an area, we could actually play basketball. We didn't have to worry about certain things.
Right.
They couldn't. So we gave them the freedom to play basketball, and they got to learn something in the area of art.
Awesome and amazing. Yes. And that, another one of those core principles is that, when you're working with children, listen. If they're giving you signals that there's something needs to change or something be different, don't be avoiding that, because guess what? You'll find their key to unlock them and help them grow and blossom.
Yeah. So one of the things we talk about is how our school system is broken in ways to fix it. And so one of the ways the school system is broken is these kids have to sit in the line, sit in boxes, do this for like this many hours a day, this many for this hours a day. And there's like no routine breakups. They're not ever given a choice. So I love how you would say, hey, you know what? Yeah, let's do this, but then let's also do this that you like. And you use that as a motivation. So, and that's also a lot of the way that people who actually do homeschooling in the traditional way, that system is broken too, because they think, oh, no, we need to have our kids do so many hours of academics a week. But one of the things you brought in earlier is if once they get that spark of something that they love doing, then that pulls them towards the education. So yeah, and there's also the break. So you let them take the break and the movement. And so instead of, 90 minutes for a shot per kid, sometimes is too long to do something. So breaking that up, letting them get out, move their body, get their energy out, then they can come back and focus on the art, focus on it while they have their endorphins and they have their breath and they have their life re-evolved. Then that also then reopens up the education for them.
Right. Later, after that first group, I had a friend of mine who was teaching a school, and it was on the far south side. It was a charter school, and they wanted a comic book. We didn't really have the same program. We were not good fundraisers. So, but as an individual, I was willing to go and do the project. Also, I had Charlie, who was our lead illustrator. She worked with me too. So one time we're there, and we're fairly new. It was like the third or fourth week that we were there, and the principal sits down with us. And we had 7 students and the principal. And I'm like, did I do something wrong? And so I'm a little like on edge throughout. So then we finish, and the students leave, and I said, did we do anything wrong? And very much to your point, Herb, he said, the group that you have, the other kids would call them the lost. They didn't have an identity in the school. And all of a sudden, they're the comic book kids and they're flourishing. I just want to know what you're doing. I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh, okay, thank you.
Exactly. They were able to have an identity that felt good and it brought them out to
Yes.
do more good.
Yeah. And they were being asked, like you were saying, what do you think we should do with this character? They would create characters and what's the character's backstory? Who's their family? What do they care about? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they were showing who they were by creating that, imprinting it on their character.
Yeah.
And by imprinting their characters and saying it brings out what they really value. And in their
Yes.
villains, it brings out what they don't like and what they want to change about themselves. So even just in that, the psycho-spiritual nature of
Uh-huh.
creating a comic book of the light and the dark side, the hero is what I want to be, the villain is what I see in myself that I don't like. And then the battles within the good and evil of the comic book stories helps them resolve moral and ethical conflicts within themselves, like, hey, this is how I want to be. So whether that is like top of the brain, like, hey, this is kind of what I'm doing, or subtly into their heart space, kind of soul aspect of it, they're becoming better people just by being able to list out their values.
Just want to caution you because I would have at one time said exactly what you're saying, Herb. I work with a fifth grade class in Evanston, which is right next to Chicago. It was a good school. And what they were doing was they were working with science, and there was a evil professor who's going to blow up the world. And I worked with them for about 3 months. We're coming to the end of the school year. I said, you know what, we got to wrap things up.
Right.
And there was a cadre of about 4 very strong boys, and they were like the leader. And one of the boys, his father had invented the Dick Tracy comic strip, so they kind of looked to him as somebody who knows.
Right.
And they said, no, we want to blow up the world. And I had told them at the outset that comics are great. You can do anything you want.
Uh-huh.
So they wanted to blow up the world. And so I'm talking, I'm saying, well, what if you want to do a book too? Now you don't have any frame of reference. You have to start all over again. And the girls are saying, yeah, what if we want to do a book too? What if we want to do a book too? And then the strong boys spoke up, well, no, we really want to blow up the world. And he said we could do anything that we want. So then the girls sort of caved in. It's okay, well, we want to blow up the world. And I was like, well, okay, yeah. Well, what if your mother, your father, your sister, or brother, they're going to get blown up? Don't you care about these people? And the girls, yes, we care about people. We don't want to blow up the world. And then these very strong boys, no, he said we could do anything we want. We're going to blow up the world. So the consensus was they're going to blow up the world. And I went home that week, not sure what to do. I was
Uh-huh.
really in a quandary. And I came back the following week, and the teacher who was in the room, she would say, you're being rude to Mr. Gray. I said, no, no. I had told them they could do anything that they want to do. I mean, they were following on so I come back the next week and I said, you know what? You guys are right. I misspoke. You taught me a very important lesson. You can do anything you want to do when you're working with me, as long as good triumphs over evil. I will not help you put your book into a finished form. I will be here. I'll give your teacher, a respite. I'll answer whatever individual questions you have. That's fine, because I did promise you can do anything you want. But I won't help you create a book where you blow up the world. So they taught me there is an intergenerational partnership where sometimes they need some coaching.
Yep.
Yeah.
So did they finally change their mind? They didn't blow up the world.
No.
They blew up
It
the
was
world.
Yeah. But again, they never had a finished product.
Okay.
The boys had like a 3 or 4, page story. And it was like kids who are 10 years old, it didn't come out as anything memorialized. But that was such an important lesson for me to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
brings up like a lot of Japanese movies because they don't have necessarily happy endings. There's not always the good triumphs over evil. And I gotta then bring in like World of Warcraft for the Horde, because there are people that play those chaotic characters that go into the death and destruction of it. But also, I think that there is a lot to be said there because they don't do that necessarily in real life. So again, there is still that learning, whether in the art of it they do go down that dark road. You know,
I agree with you.
Star Wars wouldn't have been nearly as good without Darth Vader.
Right. But good triumphed over evil.
Mhm.
In some parts, the evil one for a while. So it's not a it's there is never a winner or a loser. You know, it's like this pendulum swinging from light to dark, and it moves
Right.
back and forth. So
Right. Right. I agree with you. When we would be invited into the Comic-Con, we were in the indie section, the independents,
Mhm.
but I would walk through the professional section, the indie, and I remember the first year I did my walk, I'm like, we grew up with Archie comic, Archie, Veronica, Betty, and Jughead and stuff like that. And we grew up with Superman and Batman, the DC world of comics,
Yep.
and even Marvel was still good. But when I walked through, it was like there was so much darkness. There was so much, it just felt evil, you
Yeah.
know. And I wanted to find who else is doing good triumphs over evil. And I couldn't find it in the professional ones, and I really couldn't find it in the indie. It was sad. It
Yeah.
was just that way of being that good's always going to try. And you could see that in the television when we started to see, Married with Children, where the father is not father knows best. He's like the doofus,
Yep.
and the mother is a floozy haired, and it's like the parents are just not role models. You want to model your life after.
and like what you said with the news organizations, what is it?
If it bleeds, it leads.
If it bleeds, it leads, right? So people aren't necessarily looking for the good because there's the darkness, the shadow work of it that tends to draw them in as well. So
Right, right.
Well, that
And
kind
even in my, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that kind of leads us to the other part of your mission. What you're doing now also is working with couples lots of times and really trying to bring this light back, right? How can we keep our couples together? How can we keep our families together? What can we do to really strengthen these bonds? We can do it through the learning and education that you were just talking about, but we can also do it through working with the parents and making sure that things get fixed.
Right. I so agree with you, Christine. I was kind of going the same direction too. It was like, as an investigator, I've been asked to do surveillance. And I don't like surveillance, but we would have people who did like it and they would work in my agency. And at one time, one of them wasn't available. And so I got a call from a fella and he says, "You don't know me." Now, a lot of my background comes from, it's called Landmark Education or Landmark Worldwide. It's a transformational organization.
Yeah.
And I've coached there for 20 some odd years. I've taken courses there. I love it. It's coming from nothing. If you think you know, then ask another question.
Right.
So anyhow, this guy calls me, he says, "My wife is having an affair and I need a surveillance." I said, "No, Illinois is a no-fault state. You don't need to spend money on a surveillance." He says, "Well, but she's cheating." I said, "Then you need couples counseling." He says, "We've tried it, 2 different therapists." And I said, "Well, did either?" And he said, "I'm referred to you by my brother. His brother and I have done several landmark courses." And he told me that he and his wife actually had done the entry level course. And Landmark is about integrity. It starts with a foundation, even to the point of being on time, coming back after a break or something. It gets a little ridiculous, but it's integrity, being your word. And his wife obviously is not being her word, but whatever. So I said, "Did either of the therapists have Landmark training?" He said, "No." I said, "I'll get you a couple of names." He says, "Wait, my brother says you used to be a psychotherapist." I said, "You know what? I haven't done it for like 20 years." He said, "But my brother says you could do anything." Well, I thought, I've coached so many people, and a lot of it is where their mindset. If you really believe that you're going to accomplish X, Y, and Z, you're going to accomplish X, Y, and Z. You're going to run into roadblocks, but you're going to figure out how to go over them, around them, through them, whatever. And I said, if you talk to your wife and she comes home from work today and she would like to do counseling, I'd be happy to work with you guys. And the next day he was excited. He says, yes.
Nice.
So we
whether you
worked
believe
together.
you
We
can
set
or
up.
whether you believe you can't, you're right either way.
You got it. Yeah. Was it Henry Ford?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like the fourth session, bickering. I rented an office for a friend of mine, and they're bickering quite loudly in the waiting room. So I come out to get them, to bring them into the office, and they see me and they settle down. And I said, you don't have to do that. What I want you to do is, I want you to start it back up. But this time I want you to hold hands. So they start to feel a little funny and say, well, okay. And they held hands and they try to get back into the thing. And they kind of got into it, but not with the same vehemence and vigor and stuff like that. So, okay, you're doing great. Put your hands down. Now, what I want you to do is, bear with me, I want you to hold each other in a full body embrace and start up again. Yeah. So they put their arms around, they pulled each other close. They said, okay, now start up again. Well, they couldn't.
Good.
Yeah. So I said, I hope you see that you're two different people. You're always going to have a difference of opinion, and it could, go into an argument, could go into a fight, or it could bring you closer together with new understanding. So your homework now is, whenever something starts, shorten the time period between the beginning of the disagreement and when you end up in the full body embrace. Can you do that? And they said, yeah, that was 17 years ago.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the victory in a request for surveillance. If we could help couples stay together, and in my graduate program, I had gathered kids from local high schools, and these were children of divorce, and all of them were still dealing with the pain of their parents' divorce. And it doesn't matter if it happened when they were 2 years old, if it just happened last year. They just couldn't deal with it, and it was just so much overall sadness. So it's like anything that could keep couples together. And that's, again, I've coached so many people at Landmark. It wasn't necessarily about marital counseling. It was about a project. It was but wherever they would all of a sudden be hitting a roadblock, they came into the program with a possibility statement. I'm unstoppable. I'm indefeatable. I'm this, I'm that. And I said, okay, and what's your possibility again? And the minute they got presence to their possibility, it was like, okay, what do we have to figure out now? Got you're unstoppable. What can we do to handle this challenge now? And they always would.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Because, you're talking about, couples and things like that, what we were just talking about, but it also goes totally into when we're talking about vibrant family education, is that parents can be unstoppable. They can take charge of their child's education. They can do more for their child so they don't have to deal with all this crap that we've been dealing with. It's like, if we can stop those traumas, stop those challenges when the kids are younger, so they aren't dealing with it when they're older, what a beautiful world we can really have.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes our frustration comes from like our childhood too. And the minute we begin to see that, we see a way out. And I'm going to give you an example from my own. I told you I was this divorced dad, and, I'm doing a lot of volunteer coaching, and I'm seeing my son 3 nights a week. I'm taking him out to dinner and stuff like that. And one time I was a little short on funds, and we went somewhere, and he said, Dad, I want this, and Dad, I want that. And I went, I'm hearing, I want. And I was like, Jeremy, you got to stop. And 2 seconds go by. I said, you know what, Jeremy, I apologize. That's me. I'm feeling a little tight right now on my money. I don't ever want you to feel like you can't make a request. But someday you might be a salesperson, and he's a very successful salesperson today. I said, I don't want you to ever stop yourself because your father, reacted out of his own neurosis. You didn't do anything wrong, Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so important. And we've actually had a financial person on talking about finances and how to teach your kids finances and things like that. And there's, all these other people who come like, oh, well, I have financial issues because of my parents, because of this or that, right? And again, it's one of those things that if we just talk to our children, you don't have to give them all the gory details, but you tell them enough so they understand, then they don't get stuck and trapped in that, because they have an understanding of where that saying came from, or what you were feeling at that time. So that communication, really just talking it out with your partner, with your kids, whatever you need to do to make sure that other people don't get stuck where maybe you were stuck.
Yes, and sometimes you just hear the most remarkable things. I'm going to talk about my relationship with Jeremy again. when he was 16, I took him out to dinner, and the whole time we're there, he's like complaining about his mother. She doesn't understand this, she doesn't understand that, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay. So we paid the bill. He has to go to the washroom. He goes to the washroom, comes back. He says, Dad, can I tell you something? I said, sure. He says, I wouldn't want any mother than the one that I have. I said, Jeremy, you just spent the whole evening railing against her, blah, blah, blah. What happened? He says, you know what? Me and my friends were bigger than our mothers now. And some of my friends are telling their mothers to shut up. They're swearing at them. He goes, my mother would never stand for that. So I really respect my mother. So I said, are you going to tell your mother? He says, no.
No.
So I took him home. And after I was sure he went to sleep, I called my ex. I said, do you want to hear what Jeremy said today? She goes, yeah. And I said, well, he wouldn't want any mother other than you. He goes, well, is he going to tell me that? I said, I don't think so. I said, well, when you get mad at him, do you tell him the nice things? She goes, no, but I shouldn't have to. I'm his mother. And so, well, all right, then you're setting up a milieu where
Well,
you
he
don't.
shouldn't have to because he's your son.
Yeah.
Right, right. But again, I love that he respected his mother.
That-
And he always treated her, even after he was like complaining about something, he said, you know what? I'm like you in certain areas, but I'm like my mom too. And I really appreciate that my mom has certain values. I was like, good, really good.
Awesome. Yep. Let's do that. Let's keep telling each other what we like about each other instead of what we don't like about each other. I mean, that doesn't mean to, not work out problems, but at the same time, it's like the more you hear of what you like about some or what they're doing, again, what a difference our world could have if we started talking about what we liked about people.
Yeah, yeah. And that takes me back to the coaching that I do with couples. One of the things, I love certain books. I'm in a program right now, and I have maybe 6 months to go where we've done singles coaching. It's called conscious dating.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you guys are old enough, there was a book for people who were looking for the next leg of the career. It's like, what color is your parachute?
Remember that one.
Okay. It was this great manual that had a bunch of exercises that took you through what do you love? You might be in retail sales, but what do you love? Would you rather be somebody who's out pounding a hammer and manufacturing houses or something like that? Do you want to drive a tractor? Do you want to teach kids? What is it that you love? And that was the first time and that was because in the 90s, those were the first layoffs. People were being
Right.
let go and there was no problem in their work, but there was no job there for them. So they have to choose. This book takes a look at who are you? How many people pair up with somebody because they were attractive?
Mhm.
You were at a concert, you were in a bar, whatever it was, you got together. But when you start to go out with them, you don't think long term. I mean, if you do, that's great. You guys are 30, how many years?
33.
We got together in college in 1989, and I went to college. So I was a highly intelligent kid. I knew that I was going to get a degree. I knew I was going to get a job. Said the 90s, I started college. I went for, and I graduated in 92. And when I graduated, there were suddenly 50,000 people who just lost their jobs. I just got my degree in. So yeah, I ended up going into retail because and retail management is just retail on slave wages. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
but I went to college to find a wife because I was going to get a degree. That worked. So I had a plan. I had an idea. So I went to find a wife. So I went long term looking right away and found the most amazing person I could have possibly wished for. So proof to me that there is a God.
Beautiful. Really beautiful. You were one of the smart ones, Herb. A lot of us, she looks good. we're having a good time, we dance, whatever it is, but we don't think long term. 50% of first marriages fail. And even the ones, it's like we just fell out of love. We overcame some challenges. So I think our connection is beginning. Are you guys good? So
We're
Yeah,
here.
we're good.
this book starts with, who are you? What are your requirements? Like, if this is not there, we don't need to do a second date. We don't need to do that third date. I don't need to find out anything more. I have to have, if somebody's a smoker, I don't want them. Somebody else might say, if you're a non-smoker, I don't want you. Are you a drinker? So a lot of my women, my clients are women over the age of 45. They've been married, they're widowed, they're divorced, whatever it is. And if they've had an alcoholic husband, they don't want anybody who touches alcohol because they don't
Right.
know when something might recur.
Yeah.
So it's, who are you at your foundation? And then what do you want? And then how do you get to know your potential partner? Who are they at their foundation? So that's pivotal. After that, how do you talk with each other?
Right.
Are you open to learn? Or are you closed? And for
And that,
me, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, and that kind of leads into your free gift that you're having us put into our show notes and that you're gonna be giving to our guests, is that being,
Yeah. And one of the things is, are you a relationship hero? And I liken that to when you have a newborn baby. Do you guys have kids?
we have two grown boys.
2 girls, 2 boys, or
No, 2 boys.
2 boys? Beautiful. When you had your first son, did you know how to take care of him?
Not really.
But you read all the books, didn't you?
Yeah. And I was in
Was
education, I was a teacher, but still.
And you had other women telling you? And
Yep.
Herb learned from you, I imagine.
Some of it, yep.
I remember taking my son home from the hospital, and so the nurse is handing me my son, and to put him into the baby seat, and she goes, that baby seat isn't even strapped to the car. I was like, I didn't know. When I had to bathe him, I'm looking, and my wife says, just take him in your hand. And I'm like, so just take him like that. And it's like, you have to learn. But I worked doing some anti-violence work. I worked with it was a project for the University of Illinois School for Public Health. We met at a church on the west side. And I'm talking to them about transformation and coming from nothing and being a stand for something. And the pastor was there, and they're looking at me like it was 2 women. They didn't really understand what he said. Let me take a try, Bruce. He says, well, ladies, we're poor. We're from the west side, and you ain't got no money, but that's just the condition. Everybody got no money. That's what, but the baby gets sick and the baby needs medicine. You can make sure the baby survives. That's your position. So it's the difference between coming from your condition versus your position. And I love that. It was like, be a relationship hero. You might be having a disagreement with your partner. It might be about the kids. It might be about finance. But as long as it's the relationship that matters. So there's you, there's me, and there's a relationship. Even before the kids come, I'm with my partner now for 18 years, and we figured that out. It's like, if we begin to have a disagreement, one of us says relationship. It's like, okay, that's the reminder.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I love
my
it.
role. I've been that person.
Uh-huh.
So one of the ways I explain it is she's her. She is totally her. She is her own person. I'm me. I am my own person. But there is also a we. There is an us
Yes.
that is a tangible thing.
Mhm.
And so love is everything. And love isn't just in emotion. Love is also in the anger. Love is in all of the things. And love is in the actions that you take. So if you said that people get divorced because they fall out of love. And in a way, that honeymoon effect, that sense of, oh, that's awesome, that doesn't always last. But the love is what keeps you together, even when things get boring for a while, even when things get tough. We've been through bankruptcies. We've been through
Yeah. Ups and downs.
family issues.
Yeah.
So, lots of things. We say that we're like forged in fire
Yeah.
together. And through that,
Yeah.
love is the actions that you take on the small things. And it's the commitment to be together. So love isn't just a way you feel. Love is, I said I was going to be there for this person, and no matter what, that is my priority. So yeah, she's going to be with me for the rest of my life. I'm going to be with her, hopefully, for the rest. We're going to die at the exact same moment.
There we go. Now, wait a minute. What did you just call into our future there, babe? Be
that
careful
we're
with
going to
that
die
one.
at an old age, and yeah. So yeah, so that commitment, because she's going to be there for me. So I need to make this the most important thing in my life, because if I make this hard, if I get out of sync, if I get out of integrity with this, then my life goes out of integrity. So somehow I figured that out really, really early on, and we made choices, and I made choices that this was the most important thing, the most important work that I will ever do. Your kids you have for 18 years each,
Ish. Yep.
and
Yeah.
it's awesome if they come back, but the spouse that you have should be there
Longer than that.
for
A lot
forever.
longer than that.
I agree. I totally agree. And you know what, Herb? I love what you said. When I was getting my children in divorce group off the ground, my supervisor came and said, you need to do I was in a community mental health center. You need to be in one of our groups until you get your group. And I had done my whole first year in aftercare, people coming out of psychiatric hospitalizations. And then there was a geriatric, and I didn't really have grandparents. So there was a mother toddler drop-in group. And I thought, I'll go to that. And I remember, in Chicago, we have snow. And one time, it was the end of the meeting, this mother had a toddler and she also had a newborn. And the toddler already had a snowsuit on. And obviously he's overtired. He says, I want to go to McDonald's. And he's pulling on her pant, like, I want to go to McDonald's. And snot's coming out. I want to go to McDonald's, And she's attending to the snowsuit on the newborn. And she keeps saying, yes, 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 yes. Okay, we're going to, yes. And he keeps crying, I want to go to McDonald's. I want to go. And I was like, it's 24/7. How do you put up with it? There's no break. And she goes, tell my husband, because he thinks I'm sitting on my butt, doing nothing. And so when I was getting divorced, it was like, how do I make it where she actually has the time for herself and time for life? So that was my commitment, where I take my son out to dinner 3 nights a week. When I came home later, she's dating. And it's fine. Sometimes I would meet the guys, if they would come in and stuff like that. But it was like, I wanted her to have a life too. So, and even to this day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, she calls me, I call her. We made sure our son would honor the other one on their respective day or their birthday or something like that. So it was really that we're always going to be in each other's lives.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Beautiful. Well, we do have to wrap up, but this has been a wonderful conversation. We start off with, the inspiration, imagination for kids and helping them really break out of their shell and find out who they are and what they can be. And we've ended with couples and how to maybe keep that spark alive a little bit. And if nothing else, do what's right for the kids and keep a decent relationship if you can't stay together, to make sure that the family is still as calm and as peaceful as possible for the benefit of each other and the children.
Yeah, there was something that
Thank you,
brought you
Bruce.
together in the first place. So when things get tough, remember that. Don't focus on the things that happen later that are driving you apart. There's a reason that you got together. Focus on that for the sake of the children, and then be respectful, because you're not together anymore, but you're still respectful of the person that you chose to have a child with. And that is just so very, very important.
And missed lots of times
to be
nowadays.
in integrity. So yeah, you might be mad at that person, but there was something. Remember that something, even if it might not necessarily be there anymore, and go based on that if you're not going to be around that person anymore.
Right. And honor what that other person offers to your child.
Yeah, exactly. Bruce, tell our audience where they can find you in case they want to get a hold of you, which I'm sure they probably will.
Tell us a little bit more about your free gift. We mentioned it.
Yep.
Okay. So I got to remember the free gift. I think it's the 14 dating traps. Yeah. And so again, the first way to get a hold of me is through my email. And it's a personal one. It's B Graham. Graham is my last name. B Graham 1121 @gmail.com. So that's the best. B Graham 1121 @gmail.com.
That will be
My
down in the show
cell
notes.
Okay.
Yep.
My cell phone is 847-401-3438, but let me know ahead of time because I do not pick up when I don't know the
No.
caller. So hit me through the email first. And I'm in Chicago. I'm on Central Time. So if you're in Zimbabwe or something, don't expect a call the minute you send something in. So let me know where you're calling from. That would be great. My free gift is 14 dating traps. You know, having been divorced, I've experienced this where people go from one situation to another without finding out what was the thing that attracted me and what did I overlook by being attracted to that. And this has 14 specific situations. I didn't create the document. The author of this book, David Steele, I think is a brilliant writer and stuff like that. So he created, but so many things, it's like what's in the book, I've lived.
Mhm.
And when I looked at the 14 dating traps, I said, this could be helpful to anybody, especially if you're divorced, if you're widowed,
Mhm.
you know, and you're getting back into the dating game. It's like, how do I make sure that I don't get burned?
Exactly. Thank you very, very much. Awesome. And audience, as we are wrapping up, make sure that you're taking all of these gold nuggets that we have been dropping along the way, all these hints about working with kids, about bringing out their inspiration and their love of learning. And then also those, things about the relationships that we've been talking about. And don't just put them in your back pocket. Let's use them every single day and create happy, healthy, and successful kids by having happy, healthy, and successful families.
And I would like to thank
Love
you
it.
also for being here today, for seeing a problem and actually going out into the communities and trying to work with the children and help fix the problems that you saw. Because so many people nowadays, they see a problem and all they want to do is talk about it. If it bleeds, it leads, but they don't ever do anything to fix it. And you're out there trying to make the world a better place. That makes you extraordinary. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for helping make the world a better place. Thank you for being you, and thank you for coming on our show today. It has been an absolute pleasure. It's been a great conversation. So just thank you.
You're very welcome. And thank you in return for inviting me. And thank you for the work you're doing with your
You're very welcome.
homeschooling.
Awesome. All right, families, until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Hello, and welcome to Bringing Education Home. I'm Herb.
And I'm Christina, and together we bring you experts